Welcome to Service Done Right, a podcast dedicated to transforming the service industry. I'm your host, DJ Biersack, and I'm joined by Reach CEO and founder, Greg Biersack.
DJ, as always, great to be with you.
Really looking forward to our topic today, and we're going to be talking about the compensation model at Reach. As a part of the interview process, you have conversations with the technician and the spouse if they'd like to go over the compensation model. Why is this important to you? And tell me a little bit more about how you go about doing this with them.
Our compensation is really different from what most technicians have experienced in the past. And most technicians were hourly employees. And to make this shift for them, to understand what are these other pieces that go into how they get rewarded, right? How they succeed. I want to make sure we walk through that in the hiring process. I want to make sure that they really understand. One of our things about the company is transparency, right? It's such a key part of who we are, what we do, and we roll that into the interview process. We want to make sure that the technician really understands the details of how they are going to get paid. And so we built a compensation model. Basically, it's a spreadsheet, and we review that with them. What's year one going to look like? What year two is going to look like? What goes into each one of these pieces that shows you how you are going to get paid? We don't want there to be any mystery. Mm-hmm. We want them to understand. And one of the things that we've learned is that it is absolutely critical for the technician's spouse to understand how this works as well, right? Because it is different, and rarely is somebody going to make that decision to come to Reach all on their own, right? It's usually going to be with a partnership with their spouse, and to include their spouse in the process helps them have a greater comfort of who is this Reach company, mm-hmm. and how's this pay going to work, right? What does enrollment look like in what we're doing here, and understanding how that's going to flow to them compensation wise?
It's pretty unique to have the spouse involved in the interview process before this person's even working at the company. What led you to that decision, and why is that something that's so critical to this journey with every technician?
There's really a couple components to answer that. The first component came from really an experience that was kind of a bad experience for us. We had a technician who wanted to come aboard so bad. And we had not included his wife. This is kind of early in the process when we were getting the company started. She did not understand what this was all about. She didn't understand who I was. She didn't understand who Ann was, who's a big part in it. She didn't understand how the compensation worked. And so there was comfort where they were. And she wanted to stay in that place of comfort. He wanted to move out of that into this. And so naturally it was a conflict. And the technician ended up not being able to come because, rightfully so, marriage and the family was so important to him. I admire him and I admire his decision, but we learned his spouse needed to better understand who we are and how this is going to work. So that was a big part of it. And the second part of it is family's a big deal at Reach, right? Those connections, those relationships. I don't want technicians just to feel like a number. I want them to feel like they are part of the Reach family, and I want their spouse to feel like they are part of the Reach family. I know every single spouse at Reach, and they know me, right? And that was a big part of this. I wanted them to feel embraced, and I want them to embrace the opportunity, right? Because naturally, when their husband or wife comes to Reach, there is risk and reward. And if they don't understand that risk-reward relationship, it's hard for them to really support what we're doing. So those are the two pieces that went into it.
Gotcha. Along with that process, and you're showing all of them, there is a huge different potential. And so you're explaining that to both the technician and their spouse. How do you illustrate the delta between where they would be at if they stayed wherever they're at, and versus where they could be at if they worked with Reach. What do you do to illustrate that and show them what that could look like?
This is something that we learned along the way as well, that to help a technician understand, here's where your compensation is, and this is likely how your compensation is going to grow, right? So being able to put that into a spreadsheet and walk through that spreadsheet with them, and then this is what your compensation should look like at Reach. And they can see, here's what I'm making, here's what I could make. And as you mentioned, there's a delta between, there's a difference between those two, and they can see that in the spreadsheet. And, then what we say is, okay, what if you took that difference and you said, that is the difference of what we are going to do to invest, right? So we want to prepare for retirement, and so we're going to invest that. If you took that delta, that difference, and you invested that, what is it going to be worth at the end of 10 years, right? So we walk through that with them, and we make sure that they fully understand it. And it was important that they understood the compensation model first, because now they understand how those dollars flow into that difference, that delta that you talk about. And for them to see, wow, it's a huge difference over 10 years. Now, there's some technicians that we're working with that are young, and they don't just have 10 years, they've got 20 or 30 years ahead of them to do this. But we just show what does it look like for 10 years. And kind of the common response I get is, so you mean to tell me it's going to cost me $500,000 to stay where I am? And I say, yes. That is what I'm telling you. It helps them to understand the potential for them. And as we've talked about in other podcasts, that want is really important. And for them to be able to see that potential that exists, I think it helps to build that want as well.
Absolutely. Again, another really special part of the Reach journey, special part of Reach as a company. And just really appreciate you sharing that and going in detail of what that journey looks like between you and the rest of the company and the technician and their spouse as well, and how family oriented this business is. It's again so unique, and really appreciate you sharing everything that you did today.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And like I said, I think that having the spouse part of the process is unique, right? Most of the spouses I talk to say, well, I've never had an opportunity to be able to do this. This is a relationship business. And there's a chance to be able to build more relationships.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for sharing everything today, and thank you for joining us in another episode of Service Done Right. This is a podcast dedicated to transforming the service industry. I'm your host, DJ Biersack. We'll see you in the next one.